the button, I'm going to introduce Mark, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mark. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm really looking forward to this presentation. It's something that Mark did for a small group of us back in January, and I think it was pretty powerful presentation to people. Mark is a really dynamic presenter. And I went looking Mark up to see what wonderful things I could say about Mark this morning. There we go. There's Lynn's smiling face. Turn your video off, Lynn.
I don't know how to do that. Okay.
Okay, I'll block your video.
Okay.
There we go.
You're good.
Okay.
So Mark is the president of the Canadian Institute of Certified Executor Advisors and of Strategic Ed Charts of Financial Consulting. He is a chartered life underwriter, a chartered financial consultant, a registered trust and estates practitioner, and a certified executor advisor. He's licensed to conduct business in every province and territory in Canada. And that's probably why he lives on an island in the St. Lawrence River, because he needs somewhere to get away. He's given hundreds of seminars across Canada, and he'll talk a little bit about that, I'm sure, and he'll point you to where you can see some of the stuff that's available online. But I think it's going to be a pretty amazing presentation to you all. And I am going to, I'll leave you unmuted if you have questions. Because Mark's presenting, I'm able to deal with the chat window. So I am now going to make Mark the host, and then Mark will kick us off from there. Thank you, Mark. Good morning.
Good morning, Chris. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're now the host.
Okay.
So you should be able to share your screen now.
There we go.
Are you able to see that all right?
Yep.
Wonderful. So today's topic, and thank you all so much for your time. I know it's valuable, and I very much appreciate it. Today's topic is engaging executors crucial to the greatest wealth transfer in history. And it may seem like we've been talking about the greatest wealth transfer in history for a very long time. And in fact, we can trace it back to July of 1995. But I want to jump in by telling you that this is very timely. And first of all, the point here is that the greatest transfer of wealth in history isn't coming soon. What you're looking at here is a chart of the births in Canada from 1921 to 2009. And now that I have told you that, you will immediately recognize the baby boomer bubble. I have that set of eyes in there, so just to help you see where this chart is moving as we go forward. And everybody that talks about wealth transfer thinks, you know, this is really coming, and when those boomers start aging, we're going to have this big transfer. Well, the boomer generation was 47 to 67. But if you look at this chart, you'll see that that's not when the surge in births started. It actually started way back here in 1937. And everybody born in 1937 started turning age 80 in 2017, over a year ago. We have this massive, massive wave of octogenarians. And this is the testator era that is now upon us. So the greatest wealth transfer isn't coming soon. It has already arrived. And if you think my language is strong, consider that 7 years ago, the Conference Board of Canada called this a slow motion demographic tsunami about to hit Canada's economy. Well, folks, it has hit. Some surveys and statistics to give you an idea as to what we're looking at with all of this. First of all, estimated Canadians without a current and valid will is 70%, a staggeringly high number. The estimated assets transferring to the next generation in the next 20 years, $1.5 trillion. And the percentage of Canadians appointing a family member as their executor is 98%. Probably that's the scariest statistic in this entire presentation. And of those already in the role who were surveyed of executors, 47% pointed to administrative complication, 31% reported emotional issues, and already 26% were having legal issues. So if we were to put these stats into one sentence, this would be it. That unprepared testators will transfer a lot of money with do-it-yourself executors who are already having problems. And my question is, will you be ready to help them? Because believe me, they're going to need our help. How much is $1.5 trillion over 20 years? Let me break that down for you. That is $300 million per day, every day, 300 million. And how much of that is real estate? A third. That is $100 million a day. A lot of people ask me, Mark, how do you make money in this space? And I've tried to explain it many different ways. And the simplest is now I tell them just push a wheelbarrow outside and wait for it to fill up, because money is literally falling from the sky. This is such an amazing time. So how do you position yourself at the core of the transfer? Learn, engage, and thrive. We're not stupid people. We're not going to start a conversation we can't carry. And that's why it's so important to learn the basics, not to be able to become executors, but to be able to converse with executors, to answer their questions, to know what their needs are, and to be able to direct them. The next thing is to engage. I would ask you all, the next time you're in a social setting, simply say out loud, I'm thinking of becoming a certified executor advisor, and watch what happens in the room. It's absolutely magnetic. Everybody has something to say. Everybody has a question, an anecdote. It is unbelievable. And if you learn what you're talking about and engage, I guarantee you, your business will thrive. I want to start with some terminology just to make sure that we're all on the same page. The executor, whom I've already referred to, the female version is executrix, is the title of a person appointed by a testator to administer or execute their will, that's where the word comes from, and ensure their final wishes are fulfilled. We do things a little differently in Ontario. Here that person is called an estate trustee. And in Quebec, where they don't get all sentimental about these things, they call that person the liquidator. The testator, female testatrix, is the title of a person who dies with a will or who will die with a will. And the opposite of testator is intestate, a person who dies without a will. We'll see in a few moments how catastrophic that can be. And certified executor advisors don't act as executors. They are advisors to the executors, working within their own field as specialists and referring out for the things that they need. Do you know who will be testators in the next 20 years? Think about your clients. It's pretty easy. You just have to look at their heads. They've got gray hair, white hair, blue hair, and the follically challenged. Pretty easy. But what about the executors? Do you know who they're going to be? It's impossible. You do need to ask. And you can't even ask, have you been appointed as executor? Because most of them haven't been told. They have no defining characteristics whatsoever. They're simply average Canadians who've been entrusted with this role. I met an executrix recently. She was 82 years old. The first time I acted as an executor, I was 31. There is nothing to distinguish them. You have to ask. But why would you? I mean, you're not doing it now. What's the point of engaging with these people? Let's think about who they are. The people on the right have been meticulously selected by the people on the left to gather and protect all their worldly goods, to distribute to the people they love most in this world, to help them after they're gone and they can no longer do it themselves. Can you imagine a greater placement of trust, a greater position of responsibility? By virtue of their selection, the people on the right are the most trusted and influential people of the lives of the people on the left. And yet, we completely ignore them. The people on the left have a don't know, don't care attitude to their estates, as we'll see. The people on the right have a vested moral and legal responsibility for successful estate settlement. They're the ones that are going to be left holding the bag from ill-prepared estates. The people on the left, generally speaking, don't want to talk to us about estate planning. Well, the people on the right are anxious to talk to us because they don't know who else to turn to. I'll give you an example. The very first executor-facing seminar I did was in a community of about 100,000 people. I put an ad in the local paper. If I'd called it estate planning, I might have got 25 or 30 people out. But I called it estate planning for executors. And we had 600 people come out to that seminar. Believe me when I tell you, they want to talk to us. So what's changed in estates legislation lately? In 2012, Alberta completely overhauled their estates legislation, followed by British Columbia in 2014, Ontario in 2015, and the federal government in 2016. The provincial changes affect 67% of Canadians, the feds obviously 100%. It's unprecedented that all of this has happened at virtually the same time. Governments across the country have made this the best time in a generation to talk to Canadians. Consider that executors may turn to up to 17 different professions in the course of their duties. So which one knows what the other 16 do for the executor? They don't. We all work in silos. Sure, a lawyer will have an idea what an accountant's going to do. Everybody has an idea what the lawyer is going to do, I think. But the complete range, we don't know. So who does the executor trust for general guidance? They don't know who to turn to. So our CEA program was written by experts in the field from these professions. And what we provide is a rounded level of practical knowledge about everything, which positions you as the CEA right in the core beside the executor, able to help them in your specialization and refer out not to 4 or 5 professions, but to 16 other professions. Think about what a powerful network that is. And all of those other 16 professions are also engaging with executors. And they're going to have real estate that they need managed in terms of the transition. And it makes up 1/3 of the estates that those 16 other professions are dealing with. So they need you. Meet Mavis. I'm going to introduce you to a few characters, people that I've met along the way that I think you will find very insightful. 92 years old, widowed, net worth $1.4 million, and Mavis doesn't have a will when I met her. I implored her. I asked her, I said, you know what I do for a living? I have to understand. And my thinking at the time was 92 years old. She, in the last 70 years, has to have read or been told at least 100 times that she should have a will, and yet she doesn't. She finally relented and said, well, Mark, it really doesn't have a lot to do with me. I was floored. She went on, after all, I won't be there. She was dead serious, humorous, but serious. She went on to tell me that she had a daughter who had been appointed as her executrix years ago. She was really well organized, smart as anything, wasn't going to be a problem, quote unquote, she will know what to do with the money. Until I pointed out to Mavis that the will is where you appoint your executrix. Without a will, she hadn't appointed anybody. She had, in fact, given her daughter a moral responsibility with no legal capacity to act. I pointed out that her daughter was going to spend weeks tearing her house apart while she's grieving, trying to find a will that doesn't exist. And then in complete disbelief, she was going to have to go before a probate court judge and try to convince him or her that a lady of this age and status didn't have a will. Well, Mavis now has a will. So what changed between the 100 or so times that she heard she should have a will and when I talked to her? What changed was I didn't talk about the money. I talked about her legacy, her daughter, because I knew that was the only thing she cared about. And as I said earlier, Mavis is not alone. 70% of Canadians are estimated to not have a current and valid will. And the problem is, In many cases, people don't even know what invalidates a will because they don't understand the legislation. Meet Cyril. This is a notice to creditors and others put out by the Public Guardian and Trustee of Toronto, which tells us that he died intestate. And in this, they're saying, in the estate of Cyril so-and-so, pensioner, deceased, all persons having claims, who died at the said city of Toronto on December 31st, 1990, are required to find proof of same with the undersigned before June 30th, 2014. Cyril's estate took 24 years to settle. Can you imagine that? Imagine if people were financially dependent upon him. All of that money completely tied up. Can you imagine how much money his kids got by the time it was settled? Well, I'm guessing nothing, because the average age of his kids by then would have been already dead. He was a pensioner back in 1990 himself. Can you imagine a situation worse than this? Well, keep reading, because it gets worse. Down at the bottom, anyone having knowledge of a will dated later than January 31st, 1990, please let us know. Cyril had updated his will 11 months before he died, thought all his affairs were in order, and yet complete disarray for 24 years.
Why?
Meet Franz and Ola. Franz is a widower, retired business owner, age 79. I'm sorry? Ola is a single caregiver with no means to ever retire. She's just 62. Ola tells Franz she loves him, wants to care for him. She'll make sure he never has to move to a nursing home. She wants to be married to make things right, but she doesn't want his money, telling him she doesn't even want him to change his will. She never wants his money. She just loves him. Flattered and amazed, he agrees, and they marry at a quiet ceremony at City Hall. Franz dies. Ola inherits 1/3 of his $6 million estate and retires. So what just happened? Well, as I just mentioned, people don't know what invalidates a will. Marriage invalidates a will. So when they got married, his will was null and void. He died intestate, and the intestacy laws kicked in, giving Ola 1/3 of his estate. Franz didn't know this. His kids didn't even know he got married because, as she said, they'll just want to make a big do about it. We don't need all that. The only person who knew about this was Ola. She knew exactly what she was doing. And this has actually become so common in Canada that it has a name, and it's called predatory marriage. And it happens all the time.
Wow.
Now, I think that as people who engage with the Canadian public, we have, if not a business opportunity, a moral responsibility to find the Mavises, the Cyrils, and the Franzes in our practices and in our communities, if for no other reason than to protect them and their families. I think it starts with that. And yes, there's a fortune to be made. I think it's wonderful that we actually get paid for doing this, but it starts with having a responsibility as people who can engage with Canadians. But we need to position the conversation. First of all, we have to turn estate planning on its head. We need to change the conversation completely. Consider how average Canadians think. Remember, executors are average Canadians. My example is an RN. I'm in a hospital. A woman walks up to me and says, "Hello, I'm an RN. Can I help?" What goes through my mind? I think, RN, registered nurse. Nurses help sick people. I'm sick. And then I say, yes, thank you. You can help me. Well, what designations do we have right now that tell an executor we can help them? There aren't any other than the CEA. So consider how we can be better aligned to help and more recognizable as a professional that can help them. And we need to be the connecting force in disconnected conversations. Every time I talk about this stuff, people will say, it sounds good, you make it sound easy, but let me tell you about my mother, my father, my aunt, my uncle. Everybody thinks that everything is disconnected and that there's no way that we would be able to engage these people. This conversation isn't going to happen. And I always tell them, bring it, because I will be the connecting force in any of those situations. And the reason is I have met these people. I know what happens when an estate goes awry. And I can talk to people about the need to be well prepared. I can connect those dots, and you can too. Who wants to talk about estate planning? Why do I think it should be turned on its head? Well, think about the images that come to mind when we talk about estate planning. We think about stuffy, expensive offices. We think about the last will and testament, that nothing can be avoided except death and taxes. We think about the somber social occasion and rituals that our families are going to have to go through. We think about dealing with Canada Revenue Agency, the probate courts, and finally the doom and gloom of death. So who wants to talk about estate planning? Nobody. Absolutely nobody. And yet we're all out there doing it. You look at any financial advisor's website and they list all the things they do, and right under retirement planning is estate planning. Come on in and talk to me about estate planning. Never going to happen. How about ensuring your estate is well prepared? What image does that bring up? Well, we give out merit badges for being well prepared. A lady should always be prepared. Preparation is the key to success. A gentleman should always be prepared. Always be prepared and never be caught unprepared. What do we think we are when we're unprepared for something? We're negligent, irresponsible, foolish. Who wants to be any of those things? When somebody realizes that they may be unprepared, they have this immediate need to fix it. They want to fix it. It's important. It's a need. It's a completely different conversation. I talked about Canadians having, testators having a don't know, don't care attitude to their estates. Look at the results from this survey. 43% say they haven't given their estates any thought at all. 13% say they're leaving nothing. Well, we know how hard it is to die with a perfect balance sheet. 29% say they're going to leave less than $100,000. Only 15% say more than $100,000, and only 2% over $1 million. Most testators believe they're either going to leave a small estate or no estate at all. 85% think they're going to leave nothing or haven't thought about it at all. 85% believe they're going to leave less than $100,000 or haven't considered it. Do you believe that? I don't. Consider the average net home equity of Canadians 65 and up is currently $446,000. We would need everybody to encroach in the equity of their home to get 85% below $100,000. And yet we know only 10% of Canadians intend to do that in retirement. So we know it's impossible based on that alone. But testators also own other properties, businesses, pensions, insurance, investment. In fact, the 65 plus cohort owns more stuff than any other demographic in this country. It's absolutely impossible for 85% to get their estates below 100,000. Can't happen. But that doesn't matter because it's their expectation, their perception that's driving everything. And that's why they're hesitant to engage in estate planning. It's like if I'm selling a car and I'm out explaining the intricate details between an Audi and a Lexus, but I'm talking to somebody who doesn't even think they need a car, how is that ever going to work? Sorry, was there a question?
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I'll carry on.
If you guys are going to have conversations, please mute yourself. I don't seem to be able to.
Thanks, Chris. I'll carry on. The high net worth are equally ill prepared. Everybody thinks the high net worth have all kinds of advisors. They don't need to hear from us. This is based on 544,000 Canadians with 1.5 million in investable assets. 8% had an up-to-date will. 32% had one that was out of date. 60% didn't have any will at all. We need to be talking to everybody. Consider chasing testators versus advising executors. The testators don't know, don't care, don't want to talk about it. How much work would that be? By contrast, the executors want to minimize estate challenges of taxation, illiquidity, inequality, grief, stress, risk, and litigation. Think about that as a job description. Think about that in terms of the motivation that they have, pain avoidance. They have a vested interest in facilitating discussions. They have a legal and moral responsibility for successful estate settlement. They are the most trusted and influential people, and they want to talk to us. Why would we ignore them? Their sibling heirs will listen to them. Wayne Gretzky famously said, "I'm not where the puck is, I'm where the puck is going to be." Well, the heirs is where the money is going to be. Those people are going to inherit money, and many of them are going to want to put that into property, whether they're buying their first home or upgrading or getting that cottage, whatever it might be. We want to be where the money is. Their testator parents will listen to them, and they will actually bring their testator parents to the table. They will do the hard work for us. A lot has changed in the last 20 years or so. I point this out because people say, 20 years ago, we didn't have certified executor advisors. People just muddled through. What's different? Well, let's look at what's different. First of all, we lost Diana in the last 20 years. We got Osama in the last 20 years. Bill got caught, and the fact that Camilla having clothes in Charles' apartment was headline news. And yes, we actually thought the world was coming to an end. Well, a lot has also changed in the executor's role. First of all, we have new family dynamics. 20 years ago, we had the nuclear family of the past. For the most part, we didn't have second marriages. We didn't even have first marriages. It was just called marriage. And Bobby and Jody here, they ate about 1,000 meals a year together. They fought over absolutely everything. And when mom and dad died, the family glue held, and they were able to resolve their differences without getting lawyers involved. Now we have the extended family of today, where we've got mom and dad, stepmom, stepdad, and another stepmom. We've got half brothers, stepsisters-in-law, and a brother from another mother. Really, it's amazing. Think about the fact that some of these kids have only eaten maybe 2 meals a year together, Christmas, Thanksgiving. And the only thing they ever fought over was the last piece of pie. So when their parents die, we're going to be left with virtual strangers fighting over illiquid estates, already eroded by taxes and exacerbated by unspoken sibling rivalries. These people will sue each other at the drop of a hat. They have nothing vested to lose. And it's not just extended families. I want to introduce you to Elena and Ivana. I represented Elena in this situation. And my point is that even close families can end up in disagreement. Elena and Ivana's father, the mother was predeceased, didn't want to differentiate between his 2 daughters at all. He wanted them to know that he saw them as equals. Very cleverly, he named Ivana as his power of attorney for finances and Elena as his executress. So they both had a position of responsibility, equal. Brilliant. Guess what happened the day he died? Ivana, not wanting to give up control of the money, wrote this check. I've changed the name, but it's perfect. Ivana, shake my head. She wrote a check on her father's account for $10,000 to a law firm with the mandate to bump her sister as the executrix. She wrote this check on the day her father died. And her thinking was, we know what time Dad died, but we don't know what time I wrote the check. So it should still be good. Now, I was able to get this check shredded, but I can tell you that Ivana and Elena never spoke again. This is years now, and they never will. And I think about their father, who went to such lengths, who was so clever, only because he wanted to make sure that he had family harmony between these 2 girls, and yet they never spoke to each other again. Number 2 is communication and access to information. 20 years ago, we had this strange device. I don't know if you will recognize it. It was called a telephone. And I know what you're thinking. There's buttons with numbers on it, but you could not add 2 plus 2 in that thing. All you could do was talk to people. Our information came from this strange piece of paper. That was the only way we knew what was happening in the world. In terms of currency, it was a minimum 12 hours old, and yet ironically, we called it a newspaper, which should have been called the Olds paper. And in terms of information, we had our Google. It was called the Encyclopedia Britannica. Unbelievable. How many of us ever open up the front cover to check the publication date and see if it was current? Nobody. If it was in the encyclopedia, that was the truth, and it was good enough for us. And yet, do you know, in all the years it was in print, it was only updated on average once every 16 years. That was our world. So now let's put this in the context of an executor. Suppose I need to sell my mother-in-law's house in Regina. Based on this, what am I going to do? I turn to my lawyer. I ask him, and he says, look, all I can tell you, Mark, is you better get full fair market value or you could be sued. I turn to my realtor. He says, Mark, that's easy. You stage it. Yeah, I've heard about staging. How do I stage a house that's got 40 years worth of stuff on it halfway across the country, for heaven's sakes? Then my brother-in-law calls up and he says, hey, I can sell that for you. He says he thinks he can get $300,000 for it. Based on this, what do I think? I think, great. You can get 300. That'd be great. Thank you very much. Let me know in a few months how it's going. And now we fast forward today, where we've got smartphones, iPads, desktops, laptops, Google. Now I go to realtor.ca, click in Regina, drill down to the area of the mother-in-law's house. I see that those houses are actually going for $350,000. Then I think, what the heck is my brother-in-law thinking? And then I remember he went to school in Regina. He's probably selling it to a friend of his. That's what's going on. Am I going to pick up that telephone and call him on it? No, because I've got Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, brother-in-law dumping assets. I can tweet that. 20 years ago, I would have given him 3 or 4 months. Today, I've got him nailed in 3 minutes. So what's happening is information and technology is making things happen so much faster, and yet at the same time, legislation is making things happen slower and slower. In Ontario, executors are under audit authority with the Minister of Finance for 4 years. Who's going to want to distribute assets quickly when they're under audit authority? So we have things that are moving more quickly in daily lives, but far more slowly in terms of the execution of the estate. Meet Harold. Harold is the executor for his late mother-in-law. When selling her home, and I will just let you know, this is based on an actual event, Harold obtained sales estimates from 3 realtors. Realtor C says, I like quick sales and high volume. $525,000, we'll get that baby sold for you. Agent B says, look, I have all the data. $575,000 is the right number. And then we have Agent A. I just love this house. I'm sure I could get $625,000 for it. So what's Harold going to do? You can guess. He hires Realtor A, believing he will get the best value. After 2 open houses and a number of showings with no offers, the realtor says she loves the place, but others don't seem to. And she recommends lowering the price by $25,005 to get it on the radar at just under $600,000. You can hear this, can't you? At $599,995, traffic is much slower. Realtor A explains the buyers have moved on, but there will be others and patience is required. But after 3 months, Harold terminates her. Next, he hires Realtor B, who lists the house at $575,000, advertises it brings clients, holds open houses, but still no offers. The heirs are asking a lot of questions about the delay. This has been going on months. Property taxes, insurance, utilities have to be paid every month out of the estate, but to nobody's benefit because nobody's living there. Realtor B points out it's looking tired. has too much old furniture, hard for people to see the potential. She recommends putting $10,000 into sprucing the place up. But Harold thinks it would be better just to drop the price $10,000, and she points out that's too little to make a difference. So he drops it to $549,900. They get an offer for $500,000, which Harold obviously rejects, and the listing finally expires. Frustrated beyond belief, Harold, now at the 6-month mark, has spent $9,000 of their money, the heirs' money, maintaining the house, and they are absolutely furious. So he hires Realtor C, who lists it at $525,000, as he said, and again, he works hard to drive the traffic. He gets an offer for $495,000 with conditions, but convinces Harold to close the deal. The inspection report uncovers a multitude of problems. Harold can't let the sale go and agrees to pay the repair costs rather than lose the deal, thinking it might never sell. And you can imagine why he would feel that way. In the end, Harold gets the $495,000, less the $30,000 in repairs, $12,000 in expenses to date, $25,000 in commissions, for a net of $428,000. How did Harold do? Well, the heirs didn't think he did very well. They sue him for $166,000. They bought into that number of $625,000 because it was the highest number first shouted, and everybody believed that was the number. Take off a 5% commission minus the $428,000 that Harold was able to net, and they feel they're out of pocket $166,000. This is the kind of situation that is happening. Number 3 is complexity of assets. Back then, the post-settlement cup of tea, my mother had a GIC. Today, my mother had a GIC and an RRSP, TFSA, LIRA, RIF, LRIF, PRIF, LIF, RDSP, RESP, DB, DC, IPP, IRP, DP. Unbelievable. Every single one of these has a slightly different tax element to it. Get it wrong, get sued. And yet we're expecting average Canadians to be able to sort this out. And speaking of tax issues, consider that the number of tax returns Canadian executors should consider filing is 6. I always tell people, if you can't name them, you probably shouldn't be doing them. We need professionals. And number 4, increased risk of personal liability. Scott Dalton, president of Ayrshire Executor Insurance, says, wait a minute, does it really matter what he says? I think the fact that this job is so dangerous that you can buy insurance to protect yourself is message enough. But Scott's a great guy. He actually wrote the chapter on risk in our program, so I will share his thoughts. He says there are 18 areas with supporting case law where negligence by the executor can result in personal liability to the beneficiaries and creditors of the estate. Put another way, the beneficiaries and creditors would be what we call the litigants. He's saying there's 18 different ways the executors can be sued personally. And it gets worse in Ontario. Ontario made changes to the collection of the EAT, the estate administration tax. As I said, we do things differently here.
Yep.
That's the probate fee. Now, at least Ontario has a sense of humor because the acronym is EAT, because it's the final bite they're going to take.
You know where it is?
Yes, sir.
This moved responsibility for collection from Justice Ontario to the Ministry of Revenue. Justice simply said, this is how you calculate the fee, and here's the address where you mail the check. Ministry of Revenue has audit authority with very sharp teeth. The new penalties include fines ranging from $1,000 to twice the value of the EAT payable, or incarceration for up to 2 years. Let's have a look at this. This is John and Julie. They are co-executors and sole heirs of their mother's estate. The mother lived alone in Ottawa. She went into hospital in September and died in November. John lives in Toronto and Julie in Kingston. Julie went to the house in December and discovered damage from a pipe that froze and broke because the heat wasn't turned on when the weather changed. And they're looking at a disaster. John's furious, but Julie points out he had equal responsibility. Didn't matter where he lived. They were both co-executors. They never got along, and they sure still don't. So next, they learn that the home insurance is null and void because the house was no longer regularly occupied. Now the expense is on them. In January, they clear the house out, sell it as is to move it quickly, because again, they're still paying utilities, property taxes, and upkeep every month. In February, they file the estate information return, and since the house had just sold, valuing it was easy. They just listed the selling price as the fair market value, settled the estate, and closed it later that year. Seems pretty simple, all done, right? Except 2 years after the estate was settled, the Department of Finance audited them and found them guilty of undervaluing the property. Let's have a look. Sorry, if I could just ask whoever that is, if you could be quiet for everybody's interest, that would be really great. Thank you. But here's the problem. This is from the Estate Information Return Guide from the Ministry of Finance. The value of the real estate is to be determined as at the date of death of the deceased, not when you sell it months later after you half destroy the kitchen. In considering penalties, Finance notes that they and only they, first of all, had responsibility for filing the EIR, that they misrepresented the value on the EIR, that as a result, they underpaid the required estate administration tax on that property, and as a result, they personally benefited from the underpayment of tax because they were the sole heirs. So what's going to happen? Will they be fined? If so, the maximum fine that they face is $35,000 each. Now think about it. They were the ones who benefited. This is a serious situation. Think about how much an appraisal would have cost. In estate situations, we want appraisals all day long. I tell people to get an appraiser 5 years beforehand when they're doing their estate plan. I tell them to get another one as of the date of death. I tell them to get another one when they're ready to distribute the assets, because appraisals are so cheap relative to the fines and repercussions and lawsuits that will come about. Remember, real estate makes up 1/3 of the average Canadian estate. That is worth investing some money to protect the executor. But the fines aren't all. Will they go to jail? If so, the maximum sentence is 2 years each. Sometimes people say to me, Mark, I've got 3 kids. Why don't I just name all of them as my executors? And I tell them that's lovely. And then if they mess up, they can all go to jail together. What a nice family event. There's another way of looking at this though, and that is that hiring a professional certainly would have kept them out of jail. In fact, working with a CEA professional in Ontario now includes a get out of jail free card. We should be printing that on the back of all of our business cards, because believe me, that is a powerful message. So I want to give you a quick summary of the Certified Executor Advisor program. It's made up of 7 modules. It's 30 hours to complete, which you can do at your leisure. The program costs $14.95, but as an ASA, you save $200 thanks to Chris and Paul. So the ASA cost is $12.95. The exam is 50 multiple choice questions. I will point out that some of this stuff, state discussion, can be complicated, but we don't believe it's hard. I have 10 kids. I have dealt with education all my life. And when they come to me and complain that something is hard, I always ask them, can you tell me something you know that's hard? And they say, no, all the stuff I know is easy. Well, amazingly, you will probably give me the same answer. In fact, everybody will, because everything is easy once you know it. The only difference between easy and hard is whether you know it or not. So in that vein, all of our authors were given the mandate to write their chapters in newspaper level English. I said, this isn't about showing how smart you are. It's about making our candidates smart. We want to make it easy to learn. And that's what we've done. And I think when you go through our program, you're going to discover exactly that. Every acronym is fully explained, and the program is highly supported. It's a purpose-built learning platform, and that means you can do things like highlighting directly online, and you can add notes. And when you come back to it later, it will be highlighted, even if you've gone all through the program. And when you hover over it, your notes will come back to you. So and because of the search functionality, it's better than paper. Let's have a look at that. So I type in real estate, click search, and it immediately brings up every page in the curriculum that talks about real estate. And you can see we talk a lot about real estate in our program. Being a certified executor advisor gives you a much wider referral network. As I said, 16 professions that are referring business to you, and by geographical region. And in fact, we now have the Certified Executor Advisor Network, which is a sister organization establishing physical chapters across Canada. Those stars represent where we already have chapters or that are in the process of launching today. And because we appeal to 17 different professions, that is going to expand enormously. Communities of 10, 15,000 people that can't support any other association because they only have 1 to 4 professions will be able to support a scene chapter. So we're going to grow substantially throughout the country. We also have a national Find a CEA directory that lets you search by name, by province, by city, and by profession. And that helps CEAs find you. It also helps executors find you. And CEAs, believe me, are looking for realtor CEAs. A lot of people want to duplicate that seminar that I mentioned that got 600 bums in seats, and we had a realtor as one of our speakers. The tools you'd expect and more, all kinds of tools and handy things to give clients. For example, this is a notifications list. And so for each department, it tells the executor all the services that they look after, what forms and where to find them, and the additional information that's going to be required after they send the form in and it comes back to them because they were missing information. Think about how convenient that is. Because as I said at the beginning, you don't want to act as an executor. You want to advise the executor, ideally prior to death, but then again at death to help them and to get those sales and get the introduction to the heirs. But in terms of paperwork, we don't want to touch that stuff. We want to refer it out, and things like this are just handy guides to give the executor, add a great deal of value, and free you up to go on to the next deal. This is the executor testator review form. I said the executors will bring their testator parents to the table. What do you do when they come in? You simply print one of these off and it walks you through all of the opportunities. We also have planning concepts, crisscross roof insurance, insured bequests, things like that that are very handy, and our glossary, alphabetized, over 1,000 terms defined. Unbelievable resource. And calculators that you simply will not find anywhere on the internet because these are executor-facing calculators. For example, statistical mortality, to get an idea as to when is this likely ballpark going to become an issue. Probate fees. Most financial advisors, at least in Ontario, could calculate the probate fees, but when I say, well, that's for Saskatchewan, isn't it? Well, no, I don't know anything about Saskatchewan. Well, I told you my mother-in-law died in Regina. Weren't you paying attention? Well, with our probate fee calculator, they're given a map of Canada. You simply click on the jurisdiction. So if somebody says, I told you she died in Regina, it's just one more click. And once you know statistical mortality and you know what money they're going to receive, you go to inheritance longevity. I know how long you're going to last. I want to know how long the money is going to last, and so forth. Really handy tools. So how do you position yourself at the core of the transfer? Be outstanding. Become a certified executor advisor and stand out to executors as the professional they need. To summarize, learn the information people want to know. Have the right conversations with the right people. Talk to the people who want to talk to you anyway. Be that connecting force in disconnected conversations. Learn, engage, and thrive. Thank you. We're going to go to the Q&A. I just want to, I'll turn it over to Chris in just a moment. Invite you, if you have any questions, you can email me at my simplest address, which is info@cicea.ca, which stands for the Canadian Institute of Certified Executor Advisors. And you can register at our website /register using the coupon code ASA19 to save $200. I will turn it over to you, Chris. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mark. So one of the things that I wanted to just briefly mention before we hand over to the Q&A is we aren't suggesting you actually go out and become certified executor advisors beyond the scope of real estate. The reason that we think there is so much power behind this organization is the other 16 professions that are involved in the CEA. And, as Mark mentioned, we know that they are looking for realtors who have the same sort of education as they do to refer people to. Because when they refer a realtor, they're putting their name and reputation on the line as well. And there are some master ASAs who are working their way through the course. There are one or two who have finished the course, and I know from one of them that they are getting business as a direct result of having achieved this designation. That's kind of why we brought this. If you want to type your question, that's good. If you want to speak your question, that's okay. I have a question here from Monica. Is this online or in class? It is strictly online. I'm going through the course myself. Personally, I think it's a great course, and it is all online. So who has questions?
If I could just add to that, Chris, the reason it's online is that it's constantly updated. So every legislative change that comes about, any information that becomes outdated, we're able to update it online. We do have binders available for purchase for people who can't get connected, but I always discourage people from buying it because as soon as it leaves our print shop, I have no way of keeping it current. And that is so important. And because of that search functionality, even after you complete the course, it's a resource because you can come back to it anytime and simply plug in US estate tax or whatever it is, and you're going to find not just the information you're looking for, but the most current information available. Another quick comment, going back to what Chris had said, is keep in mind that of the 7 modules, one of them is on property, one entire module, which means all of our CEAs in other professions already understand the value that you bring and how estate sales are different from regular transactions and how timeliness matters and how appropriate pricing and marketing is so important. All of these things, these people are qualified to identify the need with the executor and to give those referrals. And when you take the course, you become equally qualified into what they do so that you're able to explain to somebody why they need to be dealing with a CEA and not just any old accountant or just any other financial advisor or anybody else in the philanthropic sector and so forth.
Cool. I have a question from Lynn. Is there a time period in which to complete, and is there an annual fee?
Okay. The course should take 30 hours. The time to complete will depend on the time that somebody dedicates to it. It can be done in a week, and it can be done on a beach in Cancun, and I know because I know of a lady who did exactly that. It can stretch out for months and months because we've seen that as well. It really depends on the individual. We encourage people to set aside a few hours a week and try to get it done fairly quickly. And the reason is exactly for what Chris had just said. We want to hear those stories from our candidates about the fact that they got the designation and immediately got business, because that's a powerful message. And the what's in it for me is the only reason that's going to drive these things. And I think that that's so important. The second part of this question is there an annual fee? And there is. It's $295 for regular members and an extra $200 if you want to be a member of your local chapter with SEEN. And once you take the course, you'll realize that if you're getting that business, it doesn't take very many ends to cover off 495. In terms of the value, that gives you your designation, your professional profile on the national directory, access to all the tools and resources, ongoing access to the program, the glossary, everything. It's a tremendous resource that I am absolutely confident will help your business.
Thanks, Mark. Another question here in the chat window. Is it just this one course, or are there others to follow?
It's just the one course. It's 7 modules, and there is one exam. The exam is 50 multiple choice questions that should take 1 hour, but we give you 2. And we also have sample questions that can be found in the FAQ part of our website to give you an idea as to wording, level of difficulty, and so forth. It is not meant to be an aggressive exam that requires a great deal of study. It's the fact that we give out CE, continuing education credits. We're authorized by every financial board across the country, as well as a great number of other national organizations in other professions. And when you give out CE credits, you have to authenticate the fact that people have taken the course. So that is the objective of the exam.
Thanks, Mark. Deirdre, yes, the cost is Canadian dollars. Makes a 40% difference. So yes, it's Canadian.
I'd like to thank her for that suggestion. I'm going to switch it to American next week. No, we're a Canadian firm.
Anybody else?
Mark, maybe I can just pop in here. It's Paul. Just to let our participants know that we're looking at launching the scene chapter for Mississauga Peel, as well as Burlington, Halton, and Hamilton. So if you are interested in taking this, there will be 2 new chapters coming out in those areas, and I'm hoping to be running the Mississauga chapter.
Awesome.
So if you're on here and you're from those areas, you'll have a familiar face to work with.
Thanks, Paul.
Cool.
And if nobody else has another question, I have an actual question of a situation that's happened. Okay. I can throw that out there. Yeah. We were dealing with a family. Mother passed away. Father had passed years ago. Mother was left. She passed away. The adult children had to deal with probate, and in doing so, had to get an evaluation on the property at time of death. And I was asked to be the realtor to provide that information. And I had suggested to the lawyer that either in addition to my market evaluation, that they also get a separate independent appraisal done on the property. And the lawyer had advised that my input would be sufficient for probate.
Okay.
And I thought that was kind of weird. I didn't want to take that final responsibility on as being the only realtor giving a number here. So I effectively retracted my working with them in that situation. This was prior to CEA and what we're doing now. But I thought it was interesting that the lawyer had said that no, any realtor's valuation could be submitted.
That's great. What we're
Any
dealing with
comments on that?
is absolutely. As I said, in each of the professions, we need people who have expertise in that area, and
Mm-hmm.
I would guess with quite some confidence that is not a lawyer who specializes in estate administration, because
Mm-hmm.
any lawyer who does would have read the guidebook for the EIR, the Estate Information Return, and in it explicitly says that
Mm-hmm.
they will not accept the opinion of a realtor.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I respect realtors as much as anybody, but in terms of the law, it doesn't cut it. And when you read all of the things that they don't accept, you realize that the only thing they will is from a professional accredited appraiser. So in that case, you would have been fine as long as it wasn't litigated. But if it was litigated, they would have thrown that value out in a heartbeat.
Well, it cost me the deal, And it cost me the challenge with the lawyer, because the lawyer had said to me, well, you're not a lawyer, you're just a realtor, so why don't you just submit your paperwork? So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting once I confirmed what my thought was on, our paperwork doesn't cut it in a court of law.
No, but
probate.
you probably would have been ahead to keep the deal had you known you were going to lose the deal. Keep the deal and pay for the appraisal yourself.
Right.
And give it to them.
Yeah.
I like this client so much, I'm giving you a professional appraisal instead of a basket of flowers.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
It's all about covering your butt.
Sure.
So I got a private question asking if there was a chapter in Ottawa, which there is.
Yes, there's an
and if you
information
go,
session. Sorry, there's
go
an
ahead, Mark.
There's an information session coming up for it. I believe it's June 13th, and the chapter launch will be sometime very shortly thereafter. But anybody interested should definitely go to the information session to learn what's going on and have some input. And I believe that has now been posted in the events calendar. So to find that, you would go to cicea.ca, click chapters, and then you'll see the events calendar, and you can see exactly when and where it is. I think it's at the Kelly Funeral Home. Yeah, we have a really good turnout in Ottawa. I think we're in the 75, 80 neighborhood. So I think that's going to be a really solid chapter.
Question, how many CEAs are there in Canada? They're between finished people and candidates. Those who are taking the course is 944. As to how many are realtors, if you go to cicea.ca, click on find a CEA, and then under profession you can look for a realtor. And you, Lynn, should find some familiar faces there.
I don't know how many we have, but I can assure you that we're light. As I said, you guys are really sought after, and it's the kind of thing, like, you deal with philanthropy maybe in 1 in 20 estates, but you deal with real estate in almost every estate. So you guys are in really hot demand. And as I said, for the seminar opportunities as well, because it's just such a great topic. The seminar that I had done, by the way, included a realtor who was a transition specialist, myself. I did finance and tax. I had a funeral director and a lawyer, and they came out despite the lawyer being there. The lawyer, by the way, was a Queen's Counsel for 50 years. He's retired, and he now hangs his shingle as a certified executor advisor.
Cool.
Yeah.
Monica in Collingwood, the seminar that Mark is talking about, Monica, the team she is a part of, they do something called Good Life Seminars up in the Collingwood area, and they just did one last week and had 70 people in attendance. And I think that this seminar will be something to blow the doors off for you guys. I think Max Hahn signed up recently for the course.
Yeah.
Yep, he did.
So that would be something for you guys to follow up with Mark about.
Brilliant.
So can we have
Max
some
is already
feedback
talking
from people?
about building his speaking team.
Yeah, cool. Perfect.
Yeah,
good.
And he's using the CEA to get everybody on page. Just if I could quickly comment on that, if I'm referring business to Paul, for example, and somebody says, you know, everybody knows a realtor. Who is this? Your brother-in-law? And I've got to sell Paul, right? I've got to say, no, he's a really good guy and he's diligent and he's taking care of lots of clients for me. I've got to really work that. But if he's a CEA and I'm a CEA, all I got to say is, no, he's not my brother-in-law. He's a certified executor advisor who specializes in real estate. And this is an estate situation and you need a CEA. It's done. I don't have to say another word. They get it. Easy, easy, easy.
Yeah.
It's a very different level of doing business and being associated with things. It's, I think it's fantastic.
Thank you.
So can we have some feedback from those on the webinar?
How do I unmute?
You just did.
Oh, I did. All right. Well, as it happens, you've just scared me.
That's
First
a good
of all,
thing.
I am a beneficiary in an estate, and it's a bit complicated because before she died, she was my cousin, but she grew up in my home, so like a sister. One son who was stealing her blind, and my brother and I took away his power of attorney for property. So
Good.
you can imagine what my unofficial name is.
Yep.
Yeah. A different B than Burton.
Exactly. So I can realize how long they can now hold this up, and that they are paying all the expenses on the house that nobody's living in except the father 3 days a week. So that's one thing. I will talk to my brother, who is a lawyer in BC. And so the second thing is I have a house that's going to be listed. The mother died 3 years ago, and I have done the realtor thing, but I will now get her to, and the probate is just getting started because she stuck her son in there for 3 years. The beneficiaries want their money, but I will now get her to get an appraisal.
Good.
Okay, because I didn't know, and so I will absolutely be taking this course right after.
Wonderful.
After I do the mastering. Right, Chris?
Awesome. Yeah, you got a busy year, Kathy.
I do. I just need to make some money.
Yes.
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you very much. This was great.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
From Monica to everybody. If I was a CEA a month ago, I would have probably closed the listing. From Lynn, I will definitely be taking this course. Love it. From
Awesome.
Blake, the seminar was extremely informative. I had no idea that such a designation existed. I learned a lot, and in all likelihood will take this course. Thank you very much for such a great informative webinar.
Great.
You know,
Thank you, Blake.
that's fascinating to me. I think Mark and the CEA first came onto Paul's radar a couple of years ago at some event, and they came onto my radar last fall. And as soon as I checked it out, I thought, you know, this is kind of what I think to Paul and I was one of the really major missing links in connecting all the different professionals that work, you know, with not just the estates, but, you know, if an accountant or a lawyer or a financial advisor or an insurance advisor have taken the trouble to become a CEA, then, you know, they're probably good people to refer to your non-estate people as well. And the quality of the people that you guys refer, I think, can be a business breaker if you refer schmucks. And then when I found out that Mitzi Dadoon, who is a master ASA and has, I don't know, about 17 different financial and insurance designations, was also at that point taking the CEA, I thought, okay, there's really got to be something to this.
She's a CEA now.
Yeah, she's a full-blown CEA. And you know, it just kind of seems like a no-brainer. You know, unless you want to work with first-time buyers who are under 40 years old, this just strikes me as such a no-brainer.
Only if you want to make money.
Or
help people. Both, but.
Lynn doesn't want to make any money. Okay, Lynn, don't take the course.
No, she still might want to help people.
You
know, it's interesting how many we're seeing people that take the course and they're in one of the 17 professions, and then they retire and they start doing this either full-time or with another professional where they just want to do that piece of it, because it really is rewarding work.
Yeah. How long has the CEA been around, Mark?
We're in our 7th year now.
Cool.
And when you're trying to educate 17 professions in 13 jurisdictions, you realize just how big this country is. So we've actually done fairly well. And we're at a really pivotal point right now. We have some of the major banks, and you. Thank you for pointing that out.
I love it. That's great.
We're all at a pivotal point, aren't we, Paul?
Yeah.
Anyway.
You should actually, it would be interesting for you to go through and look at who actually has their CEA. Some of you know of Kat Downey, who is a CEA and has done a number of presentations on different things for us. So it's always good to go through and see who you know that is, a part of this. There's some very informative videos on the front page of the website as well. So
I don't know if you know this, Chris, but Kat is the #1 funeral preparation salesperson in the country.
Really?
Yeah, for planned funerals. And I asked her about her business strategy. How does she do it? And she just looked at me and said, "Mark, I'm a CEA."
Good answer, Kat.
Great lady.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, good. Okay, any further questions or comments?
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Okay, Mark,
inviting.
thank you very much indeed.
Good stuff.
Thank you very much. Excellent.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, we will talk to everybody soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Mark. We'll talk soon. Cheers.
Sounds good,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.